Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCI Recording Studios, and today we're going to be going over how to make drum tracks in 3/4 time. We've gone over a lot of 4/4 the last couple of weeks, and that's because 4/4 is the most popular time signature to write music in. But a second place in in common time signatures would be 3/4 or 6/8. They're very similar. They both have the same kind of feel to them. It's just a matter of how many beats are in the bar. So in 3/4, you have 3 beats to a bar, and each of those beats is worth 1 quarter note. In 6/8, you have 6 beats in that bar, and each count is worth an eighth note. So they're very similar. There's not a whole lot different between the two of them, and I can kind of show you that as we go, but we're going to do some drums in 3/4 and just some rhythmic things so that you can kind of understand the difference between 4/4 and 3/4. So I've gone to my time signature here in my DAW. Every DAW has this. This is not unique to Cakewalk. The menuing might be a little different, but you go and you're going to choose how many beats per measure you have, and then the beat value. And so, like I said, the top number is how many beats are in each measure, and the bottom number is what the value is. So, like, generally speaking, that's going to be like a quarter note, a whole note, a half note, quarter note, an eighth note, a 16th note, a 32nd. Generally speaking, the most common time, the bottom numbers are going to be 4 or 8. But that doesn't mean you can't have different time signatures than that. So anyways, today we're going to be doing 3/4. And we're going to go ahead and load up some drums. And we'll do, again today, we're going to do both acoustic and electronic drums so that you can get a feel for it. And we're going to be loading up Steven Slate drums today again. Again, they're an excellent, I mean, I love Steven Slate. They're great drums, but you don't have to use Steven Slate. There's a lot of drum softwares out there, like Tune Tracks and all sorts of fun stuff. And we're just going to pull up a random drum kit here. Now, we went over the elements of a drum kit in a previous video, but we can do just a really quick review of that here in just a second. First of all, I'm just going to go ahead and make these a little bit louder so that you can really hear what's going on here. Okay, so we have a kick drum. We've got a snare drum. We've got the toms. We've got a hi-hat. We've got a ride cymbal. And then we've got our crashes. We've got a splash, which is really just a small crash. And then a china. All right. And so not every drum kit is going to have each, maybe not every drum kit that you have will have a splash or a china, but it's not super important. I realize I say super important a lot. I guess it's a quirk. Anyways, the important thing is that really you have a crash, a kick, a snare, a hi-hat, and maybe 2 toms. You don't necessarily need all the extra bells and whistles. They just kind of make for more variety, but they're not necessary when you're doing music. But anyways, so we talked about 4/4 and how the snares are on the 2 and the 4, and how the kick is generally speaking on the 1, and then also can be on the beats or the ands of the beats. If you're doing eighth notes, it can also be on the 16th of a beat as well. And if you're counting that 1E and 2E and that would be the E or the oo when you're counting that. And I can show you here in just a second. We'll bring up a piano roll. And we have our measure here. As you can see, there's only 3 beats here in this bar. But if you're going to count out, it'd be 1 would be the 1. 1E, that's a 16th. 1E and, that's the eighth note. So 1E and would be the the 16th note. So the E and the are the 16th notes, and you can put kicks on those as well, or hi-hats or whatever. Like it's just the 16th note of the count. So 1 E and 2, and that's how you would count out a 16th note. So kicks can go on the ands or the E's or the uhs. It can go anywhere really that you want it to go when you're putting together drums. But generally speaking, if you're just starting out, putting it on the beat, the 1, the 2, or the 3, or if you're in 4/4, the 4. In this case, we only have 3 beats in this measure because we're in 3/4 time. If you put it on the 1, the 2, the 3, or the and of those beats, generally speaking, you're going to be in good shape. But if you want to get complicated with it, you can put it on the 16th notes, the E and the when you're counting 1 E and No, nothing wrong with that, as long as it's giving you the groove you want. But anyways, we're going to get into 3/4. So again, hi-hat is going to be our main timekeeper here. And so we're just going to go through examples of how to put this together. So we're going to start with an 8th note or a quarter note count. So this would be a hi-hat hit on every quarter note, and that's a quarter note feel in 3/4 time. And it's gonna be different from 4/4. It's gonna have a little bit more of a waltzy feeling, and we'll play that here so you can get an idea. And you're also gonna count it a little bit differently. In 4/4, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In 3/4 time, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so it's got a bit of a different feel to it. But it's also relatively common, so I thought it would be worth going over today. We're at 90 beats per minute. We may speed that up or slow it down depending on things, but we'll keep it at 90 for right now. But counting this out, you got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so there's 3 beats in each of these bars. And the hi-hat right now is hitting on each of the beats, and that's the quarter note feel. Then we have an 8th note feel. So if we highlight all these and shorten, copy, paste it over, now we're in an 8th note feel. And so there's going to be 6 hi-hats in each of these bars. And you still count it the same way. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But now you're hearing it going double time. Okay, and then you also have your 16th note feel. All right. Very similar to 4/4. Nothing is changing as far as the times and all that kind of stuff. It's just whether you're doing quarter note, 8th note, or 16th note, just the same as in 4/4. Again, when you're doing hi-hats, it's going to feel more realistic if you are turning down the velocity on the every other hi-hat. It just gives it a more human feel, more natural. And so going back to our quarter note feel here, I've turned down the velocity or the volume on every other hit, and we'll play that. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A little bit different when it comes to 3/4. You're actually going to want to have the strong beat here. More like this instead of every other. I apologize. In 4/4, it's every other. In 3, it's going to feel more natural if you have the strong beat on 1 and weak beats on 2 and 3. All right. And that will also give you a bit of an indication on the kick and the snare. So the kick, again, is going to be on the 1. But in 3/4 time, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the snare is going to be on the 1 of the next bar. So if you're to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, okay? And we pull that out a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you can kind of hear that sort of vibe to it. I'll play it again, this time without counting, so you can hear it without me getting in the way. All right, and so that's a basic, very, very basic 3/4 time signature. And then we can go and do 16th notes. So you can get a concept for that as well. And so that would be an 8th note feel with the hi-hat. And this time I did turn down every other to give it more of that natural kind of feel. Excuse me. And then we have our 16th note feel. So we'll turn those into 16th notes, and then do the every other. And then we'll copy paste that whole thing. And here's a 16th note feel in 3/4 time. All right. So there are differences between 4/4 and 3/4, as you can see. And depending on the feel that you're giving it, it can radically kind of change how fast or slow the song sounds. So like with these 16th notes, it actually feels a little bit slower than when we had it in 8th note or quarter note feels. It feels like the kick and the snare are kind of further away from each other because there's way more hits happening in between them now. And so you can use that to kind of gauge what vibe you want to give it. So like with a 16th note, you can keep it like this and it'll feel a little bit slower than when you had it on like a quarter note feel or an 8th note feel. Or you can use this same sort of vibe and you can sort of give it, if you play with where the kick and the snare are hitting, for instance. And then you can maybe add another kick here or something. Okay. Or you can even go quicker. You can do these 8th notes. All right. Generally speaking, you don't often hear 16th notes, or at least I don't commonly hear 16th notes in 3/4 time very often. But you can use them. Nothing wrong with it. You're more often going to hear quarter note or 8th note vibes when it comes to 3/4 time or counts. But there's nothing wrong with doing 16th notes. So we'll go to an 8th note feel here. And again, we're just being super basic here. We're not trying to, this is not a master class by any means. I just want to give you kind of a sense of how you can do drums or rhythms in 3/4 time because it is relatively common. Okay. And that was an 8th note feel with that same sort of thing. And so, again, when it comes to the snare, generally speaking, it's going to be on every other measure this time when it comes to 3/4 time. So you have measure 1 here, and you have your kick. And then measure 2, you have your snare. Measure 3, you have your kick. Measure 4, you have your snare. So when it comes to 3/4 time, your snare is oftentimes going to be every other measure. Again, there are no hard, fast rules to this. You can play with it, change it. You don't have to put the snare there. You can, although it's very common, you could put the snare on beat 2 and see how that sounds. But it starts to kind of lose its 3/4 feel if you don't do that. Now it almost sounds like you're in 4/4 time. Right? And so you've kind of lost a little bit of that 3/4 feel when you do it this way, which is why it's probably more common to put the snare on the every other measure, the downbeat of that measure. And so we're going to stick with that because we want to keep that 3/4 feel. So we'll have kick on the downbeat of 1, snare on the downbeat of 2, or well, one again on measure 2. And again, your hi-hat is the timekeeper here. You could move this to a tom if you wanted. As we went over with 4/4 time, it works the same way. All right. You can utilize your toms that way if you want, or do fills and that kind of thing. But a lot of this is going to be sort of the same. You can also have your kicks be on the ands of these beats if you want to. So we have it on the downbeat, we have it on the and of 2 and the and of 3. And then the same thing here. And you start to get an idea of how this is all kind of coming together in 3/4 time. You could put your snare there as well. Like, it doesn't have to be a kick. You can act like you can always play with this kind of stuff. And then if you don't get anything else out of these videos when it comes to production, it's don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to place things in spots and just see what it sounds like. You might end up liking it, you might not. But if you don't like it, it's super easy to change. You just move it somewhere else. And if you do like it, well, that's great. Keep going with it. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to play around. Maybe we even do a snare there. See what that sounds like. Yeah. I mean, sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. The point is experiment and have fun with it. But in general, if you have your kick on 1 of measure 1 and your snare on 1 of measure 2, and etc., this is your basic, most basic 3/4 feel, okay? and then you can play with it. And it might even be fun. Actually, let's go ahead and just make all of these 16th note lengths. Again, whether you have it at a 16th note or an 8th note doesn't actually matter when it comes to drums. It's going to be the same sound no matter how long these are. I'm doing this because I want to be able to see a little bit better what's going on and not have them overlap. And it just, for me personally, I like having all of the units be somewhat uniform. Just makes it easier to see what's going on for me. But you can do whatever you want. There's nothing that says you can't have this overlapping that one. It just, to me, it would be a little weird. All right, and so you're starting to get sort of a sense of how this might, how you might start making your own drum grooves in 3/4, hopefully. And again, don't be afraid to experiment and move things around. All the same sort of things apply. So you can go to an open hi-hat here if you wanted to. You know, feel free to play with the timing of those open hi-hats. You can add a crash. All right, and then you can maybe even do like a tom fill here. And again, toms can basically go kind of wherever you want them to. I don't know if you caught this the last video, but in this particular drum software, these two are the same tom. I'm not sure why they do that way, but they do. There's no difference. So that's why I'm skipping this one here, because this and this are the same. We'll get rid of those kicks. And then maybe we'll just copy paste this whole thing. And now you have yourself a drum loop, and the toms are breaking up the beat between the two these two sections here, if you will. And you may want to vary up the toms here just to kind of make it a little bit different between the two. Just, it can get kind of boring if you don't. But, you know, in this case, I'm just making these 16th notes instead. All right. And you can have fun with it. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to, you know, play with things. One other thing that we can touch on before we go over to the electric drums is that, and you can also do this with your 4/4 beats as well. This is not 3/4 exclusive. But if you wanted to, you could make a hi-hat in spots be a 16th note real quick. Let's see what that sounds like. All right, and so I'm just showing you different ways that you can play with things to add interest, and you can add some interest by putting these hi-hats as 16th notes every now and then. You don't have to just have quarter notes, eighth notes, or 16th notes the whole way through on your hi-hats. You can add some variety to them every now and then. And that'll help also add a little bit of slight interest and break up monotonous sounding beats. All right. And so all the normal rules of drums apply in 3/4, just as they did in 4/4, why you would use things, where you would put them, how to add interest. Again, you can maybe say that this section here, put that on the ride. And so maybe this is your verse section, and this is your chorus section. All right. And so that's 3/4 drums in a nutshell. Basic. Again, don't be afraid to play with the timing and spacing of these things. But generally, if you want to keep that 3/4 feel, that waltzy feel, a great place to start is to have your kick on the 1 and your snare on the 1 of the next measure. Excuse me. And then you can choose whether you want this to be an eighth note, a quarter note, or a 16th note feel. And depending on what you choose, will kind of give you a different feel. So like maybe we take this again, and just to reiterate, we're going to really quickly just put this as a 16th note pattern. Turn down the velocity of those, and then just copy paste it the rest of the way over. And then we're going to delete that first hit because we got a crash happening there. You don't, generally speaking, hit a crash and a hi-hat at the same time, although you can. Again, there's no real rules. Feel free to play and experiment, but this is kind of more common to not have a hi-hat and a crash hit it at the exact same time, but you can. All right. All right. And so and this can be a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. So you can have fun with it. Feel free to play with the different vibes, as long as it's serving the song that you're trying to do. All right. And then I said we'd touch on some electronic drums. So we'll bring up, again, our electronic-y kind of sounds here. And we'll mute that out. And we'll pick a random kit. Maybe. All right. Bring up our piano roll view here. All right. And there's going to be a lot of different sounds on this on electronic drum kit. And we'll do a quarter note feel. So we're going to turn these down just a bit. Now this actually has more of, this almost sounds like an acoustic kit. It was probably sampled after an acoustic kit. And you can do the same thing here. Again, actually, let's shrink these down because we're going to probably have it be something like that. I don't want them overlapping too much if we can't help it. All right. And let's actually, just because this sounds a little bit acoustic-y, let's see if we can find something a little less, yeah. This is a little bit more electronic sounding. Again, the only real difference is the sounds of the drums themselves. It's still kind of hi-hatty-ish, still kind of snare-ish. Claps, for all intents and purposes, serve the relative same function as a snare would in most cases. Not always, but in this case, this clap is going to be serving as the snare. And again, you can add a little bit of variety in here. Maybe have a couple of these be eighth note feels, just for funsies. Why not? All right. Again, you can play with it. You can have it, these even be open. And you can add more kicks if you want, or snares, claps. All right. Yeah, no wrong or right when it comes to this kind of stuff. Again, it's all very kind of arbitrary to a large degree. Is it giving you the feel you want or not? I've just placed a few of these kicks on the ands or the eighth note of some of these beats. I've played with a little bit of the timing here and there. You can move things to different sounds if you want. All right. Again, no wrong or right, as long as it's giving you the feel that you want. And then if we were to say put in some chords behind what's going on here, and we'll just do piano, keep it nice and simple. Views. There we go. And so this is a C, C, E, G, and then we're going to do a G chord. So that's a 1, 5 in the key of C major. And then this G is G, B, and D. Oh, didn't realize I had that in the wrong spot. So we'll drag that over and put it back to C. And then maybe you do an A minor, not an A major. We'll drop that to a C. So we have A, C, and E, and then F. Again, very, very common chord progression, 1, 5, 6, 4. Probably the most common pop progression there is in pop. And then you can put a melody over that. You can add some bass. You can add whatever you want. But you're starting to get the idea that about how 3/4 works, or at least ideally you are. So, yeah. And again, it works with electric or acoustic drums. So if we were to bring back our acoustic drum kit here. Okay. Again, you can add some melody to it. You can add whatever you want. The concept that necessarily is not that you're following exactly what I'm doing, although I am giving you some common places to start. But that's just a starting point. You can take this wherever you want it to go, wherever your imagination or creativity takes you. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to play with things. You can change up the chord progressions. You can change up the rhythms here on the drums or the sounds of the drums. You can put the kick and the snare in different places and see how that affects the groove that you're working with. You can do all sorts of things in order to bring your drums to life, your song to life. And so, don't be afraid to experiment. Like I said, the one key takeaway from this video should be not that you're following rules strictly, but that you're getting things to sound the way that you think they ought to sound. And if that's being accomplished, then you're doing it. Yeah, like you're making it work. That's the whole point. I'm just trying to give you some starting reference spots so that you can kind of go from there. They're just places to start with. They're not the end all be all. That nowhere in the Bible did it say, "Thou shalt put the kick on 1 and the snare on the beat 1 of measure 2." Like that just it's not there. So you can put this wherever you want as long as it's giving you the vibe you want. That being said, there are certain things that if you play with them too much, you might start to lose some of that 3/4 feel. Which is that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's kind of waltzy. It's kind of swingy, like as opposed to 4/4, which has a little bit more straightforwardness to it. It's and that's why 4/4 is way more common, but 3/4 is not uncommon. You hear it quite a bit. I also said that we would talk about 6/8, and this is just mostly to give you the idea that. Or to show you that these are very similar feels. You can actually even count them the same way for all intents and purposes. But let's go back to our first drums here. I've changed the time signature, so now this is all in 6/8. And if we look, all that means is now that there are more beats within the measure for all intents and purposes. Okay. The way you would count, let's just delete all this for now. And we're just going to do quarter notes here. And in 6/8, the quarter note looks like an eighth note. At least, maybe this is just... It should look a little different than it did. Ah, here we go. Okay. Okay. So anyways, the way you would count 6/8 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's very similar to 3/4. In 3/4, you could even count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's very similar. The only real difference is how many subdivisions are in each bar. Okay, so like each of these now is worth an eighth note instead of a quarter note. And so each measure is basically twice as long. That's the real difference between 6/8 and 3/4. But they're very, very similar to each other. And you would still have your kick snare. On the 1 and then the 1 of 2, measure 2. So the beat 1 of measure 1 and beat 1 of measure 2. Everything else is the same. And I guess technically you could do this, and this is going to almost sound like a 3/4. So 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so very similar. Yeah, very similar vibes between 6/8 and 3/4. There's to the point where I kind of sometimes myself get a little confused as to what the real difference between the two signatures is, except that 6/8 has twice as many beats in a measure, or the measures are like double the length in some regards as 3/4. So there's not a lot different. They still have the same feel to them. You can even count them the same, really, when it comes down to it. So I'm sure somebody with more technical theory knowledge could give you a better differentiation between the two. But as far as I can tell, they are basically identical, as weird as that might sound. And I've never claimed to be an expert on theory. As a matter of fact, and I may have mentioned this in another video, I can't quite remember, but all of this stuff that I'm teaching you is stuff that I've never really struggled with myself. As a matter of fact, it's harder for me to teach it because it forces me to think why I've been doing the things that I've been doing. I would just kind of do them without really understanding the theory behind it. And so I've had to do something and then go back and learn, oh, okay, this is what the theory says it is that I did, if that makes any sense. And so I've never claimed to be an expert at theory. I've never struggled with putting these kinds of things together, the drums, the chords, all of that stuff. It's always kind of been second nature to me, for better or worse. And over the years, I've kind of studied theory in order to understand what it is I've already been doing. I have not been using theory to do the things. It's kind of a backwards approach in a lot of regards. And so I may not probably be the expert on how all of this works or explaining all of it. I just kind of do it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But I'm hoping that this is all helpful to you, that that you can now start doing music not only in 4/4 time, but also in 3/4 or /6/8. To my ears, they sound exactly the same. But I'm sure someone could tell you the difference between 3/4 and 6/8 better than I could. But to my ears, they just sound the same. And so it whether I was in 6/8 or 3/4, I'm going to approach it very much the same way, with that 1 2 3 1 2 3 kind of feel, that waltzy, swingy feel. That's the it's more a lot of what I do is by feel, playing it by ear, so to speak. I don't typically tend to think in terms strictly when it comes to theory. I just sort of say, this sounds right, or this sounds like where I'd want it to be, and then I'm good with it. And it's only later that I learn that, oh, okay, I like that because the theory says that that's how it's supposed to go. Although I've definitely been known to break some of the rules of theory as well. And when we get into more advanced topics, I'm going to show you how you can break some of these rules of theory as well, in order to create some variety and things like that. But that's for a future discussion. Anyways, I hope all of this has been helpful. I'm thinking that next week we'll start getting into more advanced topics. And so we're going to get a little bit beyond the basics, and we're going to get more into things like how to get, well, a brief taste might be adding polyrhythms to your drums. And that's where there's two kind of competing rhythms happening at the same time. We might get into things like chord extensions. So we're not just doing basic, 1 3 5 chords. We might start adding in sevenths and seconds and fourths and all the kind of fun stuff. For instance, just as a taste to come, A minor would be G, and F would be the E. Okay, so this should be a C major 7 now, if I've done this correctly. I'm not guaranteeing that I have. This would be a C major 7, G dominant 7, an A minor 7, and a F major 7, in theory. If I've done this correctly, I may not have. Okay, so that might have sounded a little weird to some of you, and that's okay. But that's what chord extensions are doing. They are adding the sevenths. So you can add in maybe the ninths if you don't like that 7 feel, which I'm not particularly thrilled with that ninth feel or sub feel. So that feels a little bit more natural to me than having the G dominant 7 in there. We're putting the ninth in instead. And we'll go into more detail about this in the future. This is just sort of a preview. But we have a C major 7, which is you're adding the 7th degree of the scale to the C, and that would be the B. So it's a C, E, G, and B. Then we're adding a G9, which is the 9th degree of the scale, which is a G, B, a D, and then we're adding an A on top. We have an A minor 7, which is an A, a C, an E, and a G. And then we have an F major 7, which is an F, A, C, and then an E. As opposed to just our regular and there's all sorts of extensions that you can add to these chords, and we'll go into like that kind of thing. We're going to go into maybe some minor keys, and just get a little bit more into depth on some of the underlying theory. Now, again, I'm not an expert when it comes to a lot of this theory, so I'm going to do my best to explain it in a understandable way. But I don't fully understand theory myself. I'm still in the process of learning, and so maybe we can learn together as we go. But at the end of the day, it's not the important thing is not that you're following the theory or that you're following these formulas or that you're doing everything by the book. The important part is, are you getting it to sound the way you want it to sound? Is the song sounding like the song you want to write. That's the important part. If it, the old adage, if it sounds good, it's good. If it doesn't sound good, change something. And that's kind of always been my mantra, or like the philosophy that I live by when it comes to music. There's no right or wrong. There's just, does it sound right to you? And so, anyways, we'll get more into that in future videos. I hope that this has all been helpful. I hope you've learned something, and that you can take something away from this and apply it to your own songwriting. I hope you have yourselves a wonderful week, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.